Welcome back to the Power Lounge from Emerge and the Meteor. Okay, let's get right to it. We have a live podcast taping, another one. This one is for the Betches podcast, American Fever Dream. So, to introduce the conversation, we've got the co-host of American Fever Dream, Sami Sage. She is one of the co-founders of Betches Media and Betches News, and she also hosts their Morning Announcements podcast. She is joined in this conversation by, you saw her on the convention stage, Senator Mallory McMorrow from the state of Michigan, State Senator Mallory McMorrow. I can't wait to hear what they're going to get up to, so let's get to it.
Thank you so much, Cindy. Thank you for being here. Welcome. Thank you, Senator McMorrow. It is such a pleasure to be on the stage with you.
Hi, everybody. Hey.
Hey.
Woo, Michigan, what's up?
Go Michigan. Go Michigan. Let's get right into it. Senator McMorrow, you made an epic appearance on the DNC stage the other night. Are your arms still sore?
They are. So if anybody saw my appearance Monday night, it's become a recurring theme. So I introduced Project 2025 here at the convention. Kenan Thompson picked it up last night. The book, I described it to somebody today as the country's worst Olympic torch that we just keep passing on. But it is heavy. It weighs about as much as my daughter, and she is 3.5.
Wow, well, that's adorable. Is it really all in there? Is that book real, or is it just like a prop book? I have to know.
It is. So we had worked it into the script with the speechwriter, and I were going back and forth, and I was imagining a normal-sized book. I had never spoken to an arena before. So huge credit to the DNC team who built a much larger version of Project 2025, but they painstakingly recreated every page.
Wow.
So it is all 923 pages of Project 2025.
They have really not let a single detail go unaddressed. So you are quite a rising star by all accounts in the Democratic Party.
Thank you.
I remember, yes, she is the greatest. I remember exactly when I first saw you. You had this very impassioned speech on the floor of the Senate in Michigan, and you were leaning into an idea that I think as white women we can probably relate to, which is that there is this coverage, but also, it's an odd position to be in as a progressive, because people, expect you to come from a certain place. But you were saying basically that, as a Christian woman, you have all this privilege and that you just want to live a normal life. And I feel like what you had said was sort of the beginning of people actually speaking like plain English to get these progressive points across. So can you talk a little bit about why do you think that moment went viral? And why, if those things are sort of being said all the time, why is it that is not more prominent?
Oh my goodness. So yeah, to set the stage for anybody who may not have seen it, back in 2022, I woke up one morning to the news of a fundraising email from a Republican colleague of mine, fundraising for herself, and she accused me by name of wanting to groom and sexualize kindergartners and wanting 8-year-olds to believe that they were responsible for slavery. Just about the worst of our Trumpian hellscape that we live in terms of political attacks. And I was in a place, I was serving in my first term. I flipped a Republican district when I first ran for office. After training with Emerge, I'm an Emerge alum. And I had been ostracized. So over 4 years, I introduced 49 bills. I didn't pass a single one. Not only did I not pass any legislation, I never even got a hearing. So I was in this place when this attack happened that was already pretty dark. I felt like I had let everybody down who had supported me and donated to me and knocked doors with me. And I had been redistricted into a primary with a Democratic colleague. So given all of that, I had sort of decided I wasn't going to run for re-election. So that was my mentality when this happened. And something about that, I decided if I'm going to go down, I might as well go down swinging. And I realized this might be the last speech I ever give. on this floor, so why not just go for it? This was in the middle of the rise of groups like Moms for Liberty that were taking over school boards and banning books, going after so-called critical race theory and now diversity, equity, and inclusion officers. And I had gotten a phone call, a long conversation I had with one woman in a more conservative area of my district who told me she had joined one of these parents groups. She was frustrated with her school's administration, but she said, I'm not this person. I don't want to attack a kid because they're gay. I don't want to tamp down on our ability to learn accurate history and promote diversity. She said, but I don't know where to go. And I thought about that a lot. So, I am, and I said repeatedly throughout the speech, a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom who knows that hate will only win when people like me stand by and let it happen. And it was very intentional to speak to people who are like me, to say it's on us. Because I think, to your point, as white women, particularly white women who have privilege or are upper middle class, it can be scary to step into a space that we know we need to step into, not make it about us. And I think too often, maybe not even maliciously, out of the fear of saying the wrong thing, white women are doing nothing. And that was unacceptable, and that speech was posted online. Within a few hours, Hillary Clinton retweeted it. I got a phone call from President Biden. I missed it. It went to voicemail. That was deeply embarrassing.
You and Tim Walz.
Me and Tim Walz. I know when I saw that video, I was like, that's deeply relatable. I love you, Tim. But yeah, it took off, and I think it really struck a nerve with people. I got letters and phone calls and emails, I still do to this day, from people all around the country who said that is who I am and what has been missing.
Yeah, I mean, it almost felt like you were like the pre-Tim Walz in the way you were putting it so plainly and so just putting it out there in a way that, you're right, I think people don't have the candidness that's necessary. But I also feel that this is going to change. I think that there's been we've turned a corner on the type of language that we're using and the pride that we have in putting forth progressive ideals. Like, I'm not a monster because I want to give kids school lunch.
No.
So how do you, when you mentor younger candidates or peers or maybe even not younger, how are you sort of encouraging them to put that voice out there, to find the confidence and the knowledge to be able to speak in such a way?
Yeah, so a very strange thing happened in the wake of that speech. It was covered all over the place. James Carville called it the blueprint for Democrats on how to fight back.
That was exactly what I thought at the time, too.
Right. Well, but when it happened, when I heard that specifically, I worried that my speech would become a Mad Lib. And people would start to look at, okay, I have to do exactly what she did. Because I think as Democrats, when we see a thing work, we think we have to do the exact same thing. And my colleague, Jim Ananich, he used to be the Senate Democratic leader, an incredible senator from Flint who supported me to help me get into office. He's also much more heavy-set than I am. He's got a beard, and he said, Mal, I went to an event in my district, and I stood up and said, I'm a straight, white, Christian, married, suburban mom. And it didn't work, which was pretty funny. But what I tell people all the time, I have been tapped now sort of as a communications, guru. People invite me to give talks about how do we message. And I always say, talk about anything like you would talk to your friend at a bar, which when you think about kind of that framing, it puts you in the mindset of, I want to be excited about this story that I'm telling my friend. I want to use regular language like I'm going to use between friends. And it's going to be relatable and it's going to be short, because you want to do it between drinks. So I think when you think about it that way, it can look many different ways, but it's going to be authenticity, I think, is a word that's overused, but it's authentic. It's true to who you are. It's short, it's catchy, and for Democrats, I think for too long, people have accused us of being elitist and out of touch. If you talk like a normal person, suddenly you're talking with people and not at them.
Absolutely. It's interesting that you say that, because when we founded Betches and then later Betches News, that was the entire premise of it. It was that there is a place to talk about politics and political issues online, but you have to talk about them the way you would talk about pop culture or a movie or Bravo. And it is really, I think, going to be the future. Is there a particular issue or message that you think is going to be kind of that next frontier?
Oh my goodness, for me it's childcare. This is such a huge gap that we have in this country. The fact that I gave birth in 2021, so in the middle of the pandemic, I wasn't sure when we would come out of the pandemic, so I didn't apply for child care centers. I was on like 26 different wait lists. And I recognize that even with the resources that we have, if it's this hard for me, it is impossible for anybody else. I talked to a woman in my neighborhood as I was walking my daughter in her stroller who said she was on 47 different wait lists for her 2 sons, all of which had a deposit that was non-refundable. So she had spent hundreds, if not thousands of dollars just to find a child care center, and she eventually gave up and said, it would have cost my entire salary just to have child care for my 2 young sons, so I left the workforce until they were old enough to go to kindergarten. And I think that we now have in Kamala Harris, she has put this at the forefront. It has been disgusting to see the Republicans attack people like Kamala, people like Pete Buttigieg as not parents, as if there's only one way that's acceptable to be a parent. But I think this is going to be it. We should talk to women have a loud voice and a platform now in a way that we haven't. We can talk to each other about this and make the case that if we do not close this gap, it hurts our economy.
Absolutely. I mean, that's a whole conversation.
Whole other thing.
Whole other conversation. So, you obviously encourage young women, young people to run for office, but not everyone is really cut out for running for office. And I think that people, like you said, if they don't know exactly what to say or exactly what to do, they're sort of like bumbling around a little. And, you join a call or you get connected, but that road of engagement is not steep enough to make a difference quickly. So are there other things that you encourage people to do or change or look at their civic engagement and their civic life that do not involve running for office?
Oh my goodness, of course. So many things. This could be an entire other conversation in itself, but something that we saw in Michigan. In the wake of the election of Donald Trump in 2016, there were all of these organizations like Emerge and many others that specialized in recruiting and training candidates. But what we found in that cycle was we didn't have any staff. We didn't have anybody who knew how to run campaigns or had done this before. So my first campaign, it was an all-woman campaign team. None of us had done it before, and we figured it out as we went along. So I think if you aren't the person who wants to go out and shake hands and meet people and give speeches and have conversations, if you're not going to be kind of the spokesperson of the effort, be on the team. We need great people. My chief of staff and political directors in the front row, Emily, who makes everything happen. There's so much effort in American politics, we almost celebritize it in a way that I think is very unhealthy without recognizing it takes an entire team in every single office at every level to successfully not only run and win, but to pass legislation, to actually deliver on the things that we believe on. So whatever your skill set is, there is a place for that in a campaign or in an office or just engaging in your community. Network your community. Something I said on the White Women for Kamala call was the most influence you can have is right at home. We have made these social media bubbles where we talk to only people that we agree in, but how many people know every single person who lives within 3 blocks of them? Honestly, do you know every single person in that circle in your neighborhood? Probably not. The most influential thing you can do is network that little bubble and then talk to them about issues because they're going to show up for neighborhood issues. But then when it comes time to vote, think about how many people are right there that you can help turn out that are going to believe you and trust you because you're their neighbor, not somebody calling them from another state.
Yeah, I've been saying a lot this election cycle is that if you have like one cool high school senior who is canvassing for Kamala Harris or a local candidate, for example, that will drive so many more people to the polls than maybe the entire brat meme. Because the brat meme is about getting the conversation and creating a permission structure for people to care about this and to post about it.
Right.
But we also have to like go out on election day or get a mail-in ballot. And I'll admit, I have had cycles in my life where I have just shit, I
Just
I
forgot.
didn't make it.
Yeah.
Or I forgot, or
Totally.
primaries that I was like, wait, that was today. And I'm a pretty engaged voter. And so people who are non-engaged voters, the fact of whether they'll vote that day is really like, did they run late for an appointment? Were
Totally.
their kids, were their kids sick? And all of that makes a difference. One thing I want to ask about is sort of this double bind. And we've been noticing it with, I think, a lot of the way people are talking about the vice president's platform for her campaign. And I see a lot of headlines that are like, this convention's all vibes. There hasn't been any substantive policy. But then you think back on like Elizabeth Warren, who came with 300 plans, and Hillary Clinton, who had like white papers coming out of her head, like just coming out of everywhere, and no one cared. It was like no one was being like, oh, look at these competent women who they've thought through every single thing. It's like, actually, no, she's a scoldy librarian.
Right.
So how do women get, and this again goes back to the way you were speaking about things and the way you're able to tap into that white woman aspiration.
Yeah.
How do you kind of advise women navigate that double bind of needing substance, but they don't like your substance, and you have to look a certain way, but you can't scare anyone? And
I mean, there was so much imposter syndrome. I remember when I even thought about running for office or getting into this work, I didn't think I was remotely qualified to run for office. I used to be a car designer. I was a Hot Wheels designer. I worked in media. Nothing in my career was politics. And I thought, okay, I know I need to do this. Something is calling me to do this, but I'm going to volunteer on a campaign. Maybe I'll start at entry level. Because as women, I think, we have that imposter syndrome. If I don't know as much as the person at the top, I'm not qualified and I have to start at the bottom. And through Emerge, one of our teachers, a training, who was an elected official in Michigan, who I had deep respect for, came in. We had gotten to know each other. She knew my career background, and she finally pulled me aside and said, Mallory, men never do this. They never second guess themselves. They just go for it. Donald Trump ran for president and won with no qualifications to do that. So she said, look at your skill set, your career, your background, and just run for the office you want to run for. So I put my name on a ballot. I challenged the Republican incumbent in a Republican district in Michigan. They laughed me off the entire time, but joke's on him, because we rallied more than 500 volunteers over a year and a half. Many women, retired teachers, young people, kids who couldn't vote yet but recognized the importance of gun violence prevention and reproductive rights, all of these things. We brought them all together, and we kicked his ass. We swung that district. He had won this district previously by 16 points. I won by 4. That's a 20-point swing that all of us were able to do together. And I think that it is about showing who you are as a person and how you lead. I was an Elizabeth Warren supporter. I loved all the plans. Exactly. Hello. We got Elizabeth Warren. I'm still dreaming big and fighting hard every single day.
Same.
I love it. We can be competent, but we also have to show people who we are as leaders, and maybe not necessarily always buried in the plans, because the reality is when you get elected, you cannot deliver everything on your own. You have to work. If Kamala Harris becomes president, she cannot unilaterally deliver on all the things we want her to do. She needs to work with Congress. She needs to work with the U.S. Senate. She needs to work with state governments in every state in the country. So I think that the knock that maybe there aren't enough plans is bullshit. Because she's showing us, I mean, look at this campaign that she's been able to put together in just weeks. That, to me, is an indication of leadership, where all of us, I mean, look at all these Zoom calls that were formed. It started with Win with Black women, then it was black men, then it was white women for Kamala, then it was white dudes for Kamala. I saw one, my husband is Jewish, and he just aspires to be Doug Emhoff. That's what he wants to be when he grows up. And there was one I saw circulating that was like, Jewish dads for powerful women who want to live in a house with a bowling alley, and maybe we'll have a Zoom call if it's convenient. And I just loved it. And she's given permission for everybody to be themselves, but join a team. And to me, that is a hell of an indication of the type of leader she's going to be, more than any amount, certainly more than a 923-page Project 2025 policy document, which should go on a shelf and never come back.
Yeah, like a DNC Hall of Fame, particularly that large one. So just a last question, going back to something you said before, which I did not know about, your original breakout moment, which is that you were leaving it all on the field. And I think there is something very freeing when it's like, I don't give a fuck what these people think anymore.
Yeah.
And like, it's, look, lots of applause for not giving a fuck what these people think anymore. And as I'm getting applause for this, I'm going to try to store this as a core memory next time I'm feeling some self-doubt. But how can we tap into that even when we're not leaving it all on the field, even when the stakes feel really high and we're not like, making our last stand? How can we tap into that freedom that we could feel if we were?
I think what I took out of the experience, because again, I didn't go into it planning for the reaction that I had to this speech, that I think really drew me back into this work in a way that I wasn't anticipating. But what it said to me is, forget all the bullshit. I was so caught up I had blinders on to, oh no, I haven't passed any bills and all of these people are disappointed in me and they wasted all of these hours. I was so in my head. And the reality was, the people who supported me and loved me and who I represent in my district didn't care. Like, we have a lot of new legislators in Michigan who are so concerned about getting a PA. That's a public act. That is when your bill passes into law, they want their name on it. Nobody gives a shit. They don't know. They don't know what bills are. They don't know who wrote them. But if you present yourself, and that was a really good reminder for me, that as long as my values and my reason for doing this, as long as I'm checked into that, it doesn't matter. They're just numbers that are arbitrary and don't mean anything.
Right. I definitely think there's something to leaning into your purity of your intentions and why you're doing it that is not as focused on, getting your name, getting another line on the resume to impress people and for your next campaign.
There was something, a video I watched of Adele a few months ago where she was accepting an award, and she said something that I thought was so beautiful. She was talking about her first album came out, when she was 21, and then she had a kid, and there was all this pressure on her to constantly stay in the spotlight. And she accepted this award, and she said, I reject the premise that to be successful, you have to constantly be relevant. Let's give ourselves freedom, especially as women, to take a step back and to be moms and to be family members and to have friends and give ourselves grace and space and trust that when we're ready to step back in, people will be there for us.
I say that all the time. A tree doesn't bloom in every season.
Right.
And we have to grow.
That's right.
And blossom
That's
sometimes.
right.
So we'll leave you with that. Thank you so much, Senator McMorrow. You are a star, and
Thank
I am
you.
very excited to see where the future takes you.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for coming.
Go
Happy
Michigan.
convention. Go Michigan.